Perfect. So I don't know if any of you have attended my webinars in the past, but I do love to utilize the chat. So feel free to put in any questions in there. If at any point you feel really compelled to raise your hand and come off mute, Justice will be monitoring everything and would love to hear from you. Just remember that there is time for Q&A at the end. And oftentimes what I found is a lot of the questions will somehow get asked throughout the presentation too. So if you feel like you have something to say, absolutely welcome that. The topic today is how to befriend your inner imposter to build confidence. And I'd love to hear in the chat, before we begin, have you ever had a feeling that maybe you're incompetent, or maybe you've asked yourself, what am I doing here? Maybe you've felt like you're a fraud when it comes to your work or in social settings. Maybe you feel like you're going to be found out, or you don't deserve to be where you're at. Maybe you've asked yourself, I don't have what it takes. But in essence, it's, maybe I don't belong here. So if that's you, I'd love to just hear a quick yes, or maybe, or yes, I feel like a fraud, or whatever that is. Would love to just collectively point that out. Imposter syndrome is one of those things that has become a bit of a buzzword, and we're going to be talking a lot about it today. We think everyone has their life together and is perfect, but as we, I think, deep down know, that's so far from the truth. There are no perfect human beings, but that false perception of perfection causes us all to question ourselves, right? There was a 2011 study from the International Journal of Behavioral Science that found that approximately 70% of people experience this feeling at some stage. And I share that statistic, and I also invite you all to use the chat for this, to just really normalize this experience. I think sometimes it can feel like when we're in that headspace and it's constant, that we're alone. And even people like Sheryl Sandberg, Maya Angelou, David Bowie, Serena Williams, they are all leaders who've expressed that they have felt like an imposter at some point in time, and have felt that self-doubt. But the good news is today we're going to be talking about this, but we are already equipped with a number of tools that we can use to make our inner imposter work for us. So with that, Justice, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. So for those of you coming to us from Eventbrite, we are Ama La Vida. We are a life, health, and wellness leadership and career coaching company. And my name is Justice. I'm a relationship strategist on the team. And what that means is when you schedule a time to have a conversation, we're going to use a half hour to kind of dive deeper into what your current needs are, what's your current situation, and what are your goals. And we're really going to use that time to identify which one of the coaches or team of coaches on our team is going to be most appropriately suited to help you accomplish those. So if anybody has any questions or anything right now that they want you to go up their chest, our calendars are, I'm going to post the link right here. They are first come, first serve, and the spots are filling up fast. So feel free to jump on there. And anybody coming to us from a webinar, you get your first session free. So something to keep in mind as you're considering next steps, or really just exploring a conversation to learn more about us as a company, and maybe even working with Cait as a coach. So with that being said, Cait, back over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely encourage you all to take advantage of that deal of coming to the webinar and having the first session free. It's basically like 50% off if you sign up for a 2X membership. So it's a good one. As I mentioned, I'm Cait Swami. I am a leadership, life, and career coach here with Ama La Vida. I am not going to get too much into my background because you can see other webinars. I talk a little bit about that. But what I do want to talk about here is that this idea of imposter syndrome comes up consistently with my clients across all of these verticals. I'm going to do my best to really take you through a journey today to understand what it is. And I'm hopefully going to be able to give you some tangible tips and tricks that can support you when your inner imposter is taking over. And that's really what my goal is. My goal is for today. So today's agenda, we're going to be talking about what imposter syndrome is. I'm going to give you a pretty good overview. I'm going to help you to kind of dive into that a little bit by taking some inventory on your own. And again, opportunity to leverage the chat there. I'm going to be talking about the 5 types of imposters. For those of you who receive our newsletter, you probably saw our imposter syndrome quiz that was just launched. This is a tool for all of you that is free, that you can go in and figure out what persona you fall into. So I'll be talking about that. That will also come out in the quiz itself, will come out in the recording summary. So be on the lookout for that. I'm going to give you some tips on how to befriend your inner imposter. I'm going to talk through coping strategies when our inner imposter is getting out of whack. And then I'm also going to give you some other tools and resources that I have found particularly powerful as of late with many of my clients experiencing this idea of negative self-talk. And then, of course, as we mentioned before, we'll save some time at the end for some Q&A. So I'd love to invite you all in the chat to, and I've already given so many of these answers away, I'm just realizing what comes to mind when you think of imposter syndrome. And then if you feel called, or maybe you just want to keep it to yourself, bring to mind an experience where you yourself felt like an imposter. Maybe it was a job interview, maybe it was giving a presentation, maybe it was in a social setting. I know the last 2 years have been really hard for a lot of us, not only the collective grief, but just the collective social anxiety that we've all been feeling. So think about what that experience is. It may be a number of experiences, but I want you to keep that in mind throughout the presentation today, and we're going to come back to it at the end. So Justice, I want to ask, is there anything in the chat that you would like to call out? Because I can't see it on my end.
Yes, we've got a couple of things. The first one I see is I'm a trainer and I train out of my field almost every time I stand up in front of a group. We have another one that says, in college, do I really know what people think I know? I apologize, everyone, as some people are also typing what I'm reading jumps out, so bear with me.
Yeah, no,
feeling fake.
Those are really good examples.
One more is feeling fake, like I'm not like the other folks or experts.
Oh my gosh, yes. The trainer on the call, I certainly feel that way. I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable, but in preparing for today and the anxiety that I get coming into this type of forum is a lot. And I often feel like, I was joking with my husband last night, that I feel like an imposter talking about imposter syndrome, which is obviously so ridiculous. No one is an expert in this. I know quite a bit about it if I really trim things down, but it's that performance anxiety around, presenting and acting like you're the expert is so real. And then the comment around being in college and not knowing enough, right? Like I see that all the time, especially with people that have a fear of public speaking. They've been called out at some point growing up in school. They were called on and didn't have the answer, right? Those experiences repeatedly over time, they translate into our work lives, into our social lives. And it's hard. And so I just want, again, all of you know that we're all connected here. We've all experienced this feeling. Anything else, Justice, that I should acknowledge before I move forward?
Yeah, we have one that says feeling incompetent in a field/job that I have education in.
Yes. Yes. And I see that a lot, and especially the further up you go, right, and the higher education that you have, it's really common to feel like I still don't know enough, right? And we're going to talk about that today. some tools to actually work through that. And, one of them I'll kind of give you a sneak peek preview into that right now is really actually naming the accomplishments and the things that you do know, and starting from a place of your strengths can be a really motivating exercise to go through in order to recognize the things that you do know. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on just for the sake of time and talk about what imposter syndrome is. So I think many of you, it sounds like, have a really good idea of what it is. What I would love you to walk away with here is that imposter syndrome is not a diagnosis. We can't really tell people that they have imposter syndrome. And actually, we should really stop telling people that they have imposter syndrome. Rather, what it is it is a pattern of thinking. It is defined as doubting your accomplishments, skills, or talents, and feeling like you're a fraud who doesn't deserve to be where you are. So that, especially that last example, right? I've gone through all of this schooling, I have the education, and yet, how did I get here? While for some of us, imposter syndrome can be motivating, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit, it does come at the cost of persistent anxiety. So overachieving is also a way that imposter syndrome comes through. You might over-prepare or work much harder than necessary to make sure that no one finds you out. So what it can also sound like is self-doubt, which is sort of like a belief in your lack of intelligence or competence. That's definitely shined through from some of the examples today. Unworthiness. So maybe you're given praise or you've received a promotion and you feel like you're undeserving of it. Self-sabotage is something that I see a lot with my clients. When you actually do succeed, you say, things are just too good to be true, right? Maybe you tend to procrastinate or have no boundaries or over apologize or people please, right? Like all boils down to that self-sabotage. Comparison, comparing your success to others. This one can be a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later. But when it's that constant comparison and feeling like we can't live up to that quote unquote perfection, right? That can be really debilitating. Fear of failure. So the fear that you won't live up to expectations or fear that you'll fail. Sometimes it can be even fear of success, I see too. And then overachieving, as I mentioned earlier, setting unrealistic expectations. And then when you fall short of those expectations, being overly disappointed or self-critical. So I want you all to take some inventory. And we can leverage the group chat here and you can just say, yes, this is me, or no, or however you want to do it. Do you agonize over even the smallest mistakes or flaws in your work? Do you attribute your success or luck to outside factors? Are you very sensitive even to constructive criticism? Do you ruminate on that? Do you feel like you'll inevitably found out as a phony? And do you downplay your own expertise, even in the areas where you're genuinely more skilled than others? So I know that one comment around the education piece, I would be willing to bet that this last one is you. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about this psychologist today, but all of these questions and this idea of imposter syndrome comes directly from our thoughts. And no matter what, we all experience this inner dialogue, right? We all have, I call her my inner mean girl. I'm sure many of you have an inner mean girl or something similar. Sometimes it's called the inner critic. But the truth is we all have an inner critic and we also have an inner coach, right? And this chatter, which Dr. Ethan Kroos, he's this acclaimed psychologist. He's the author of the book Chatter, which I'll give you all in the notes as well. It's been a really, really transformational book for myself and my coaching and for a lot of clients. He also has a podcast too, which I recommend. But he talks about how this chatter keeps us in this constant state of fear. And so what happens then is our inner imposter can cause us to fold under pressure. But I say, but in a good way. The good news is we're already equipped with a variety of tools to make our inner imposter work for us. So I'm going to get there. I promise I'll land the plane, but I just want you to first all take some inventory and really recognize, like, is this something that I'm experiencing? There are 5 types of imposters. Certainly there's maybe many more that we could name here, but I'm going to be talking about the primary types before we get into the tools. Number 1 is the perfectionist. So the perfectionist is someone who's never satisfied. They always feel their work could be better. Rather than focus on their strengths, they tend to fixate on flaws or mistakes. This often leads to a lot of pressure and anxiety. Number 2, we'll go to the expert. The expert is always trying to learn more and is never satisfied with their level of understanding. Even though they're highly skilled, they underrate their own experience. And as I mentioned before, the expert is the persona that's really more common. I often see it with people that are higher up, senior executives that I coach, kind of this fear that I'm going to be found out, right? That I don't know enough about this. The super person. So these individuals generally feel inadequate and are often compelled to push themselves to work as hard as possible. That overachiever type. And they tie their worth up to how they perform rather than who they are. Then the natural genius. So this type of imposter syndrome is really feeling that you have to have things right on the first try. And if you don't, you feel really embarrassed or ashamed or even like crushed, right? Often the natural genius sets lofty goals and feels crushed when they don't achieve them, especially achieve them on the first try. That is the key with the natural genius. And then the soloist. This is a form of imposter syndrome that manifests as a deep need for independence and a deep need to do things on your own, and independence without the help of others, right? So for this persona, asking for help is terrible because it would uncover their worst fear, that they are a fraud, that they're not smart enough, and they don't deserve to be where they're at. So I'd love you all to think about this a little bit, and maybe there's a few areas that you fall into, but maybe just using the chat, name your imposter. Maybe we can kind of see if there's some themes within the group. Justice, are there any like consistent ones that are jumping out, or is it sort of all over the place? Is it all of the above?
We definitely have a few all the above.
Yeah.
I think perfectionist seems like the most popular one, but there are all over the place right now. We do have a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, certainly. I see all of these with my clients, and sometimes even a combination. And so that quiz, I really encourage you all to check it out. It'll help. What it does is it'll give you a breakout score of how all of these are divided for you. So what percentage of each of these imposters you are. And then it'll also give you some really helpful tips on how to work with that type of imposter. So I'm not going to talk too much specifically about those tools because you will have that after this presentation today. Now I want to get into the tips of how to actually befriend your inner imposter, why you're all here today. So the first one, give your imposter a name. We have sort of done that, right? I've given you a couple of cues. You can take what you want or leave the rest. My inner imposter is my inner mean girl. Maybe you use one of those personas and name them as the soloist or the expert. But by naming them, you really can give them that persona and kind of humanize them, right? And what this does is it actually helps release some of the control that they have over us. Our thoughts don't actually have to control us. Our inner imposter does not have to control us, even though it feels like they do. But by actually taking a step back and humanizing them for a second and recognizing, hey, we all have this, that can be a really great tip in order to befriend your inner imposter. Using their voice as a motivator. So for some, this is going to work, for others, it's not. But what I'm talking about here is using that negative chatter as a motivator to really do the opposite of what your inner imposter is doing. I really love this, this quote that fear is evidence that we're doing something important. And really using that voice as a reminder that you're growing can be really motivating for some people. Reframing, this is a tool that I use constantly with coaching. A lot of coaches use it. Our inner imposter is typically the loudest when we interpret a situation as being a threat or something we believe we can't manage. So
Cait, did we lose your sound? Hello, Cait, can you hear us?
Hey, this is Jerome Sheffield. We can't hear you.
Yes, thank you very much. We're trying to work on that. 1 second. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Oh, no problem. Enjoying it.
Thank you for the comment. I appreciate that. Cait, if maybe try logging out and log back in. Okay, give us 1 second, everybody. Apologize for this. Okay. Hold on 1 second. We are messaging her offline. See if we can get her back. Give us 1 second. Yes, thank you, Mariah, for acknowledging it. You know, in this new world, we're all just all here together. So we appreciate you guys' patience. While we are waiting for Cait to get back online, if anybody has any questions that they might, want to get answered now or want to make sure, if they don't want to ask it, if they don't want to call off mute when we do have the question and answer, feel free to drop them in there right now, and I will be making a running document of those questions so I can make sure I come back in and everything gets answered for you guys. So we can use that now if you would like to. So we have Coach Betsy here from Ama La Vida as well that says that she could help answer any questions if anybody wants to ask them now while we do wait for Cait to be back on. So if anyone has some, we do have another professional coach on our team that's here to help field that. So feel free to, if you want to come off mute and ask a question or type it, feel free to jump in right now. We kind of work through this together. So
Hi, all.
Thank you,
This is
Betsy, for
Coach
jumping
Betsy.
in.
I'm sitting in my car, but I'm happy to try to keep the ball rolling while Cait gets her sound fixed.
So Betsy, we do have one question that came in. It said, is imposter syndrome more common now than before?
Oh, that's a good question. What do you guys think? Type in yes if you think it's more prevalent now. And what are the factors? I'm thinking out loud, but I think one of the factors may be for some people showing up remotely via Zoom is giving them more power, more confidence. They're sitting in their own office, in their own chair, in their own comfortable home. And people say that that gives them more confidence. For others, not being around the people that you work with, not being able to think and brainstorm and chit chat and all the other benefits that we get from being a social creature makes them feel less part of a team or a system. So I think both are possible. And probably the important question for you to ask yourselves is my imposter syndrome flaring or settling over the past couple months or dare I say years?
Thank you, Betsy. Another question we have is, how do we nicely shut down the self-saboteur?
Okay. So it was funny. I was listening to half of a podcast this morning, and what we recommend as coaches typically is to address the saboteur, to thank it or him or her for what they've done to make us aware of possible pitfalls, dangers, areas of concern, and then to step into the more knowing self, to use very coachy language, to basically say, thank you. Thank you for keeping me safe. I've got that. And here's my game plan for moving forward. So the saboteur serves a purpose in our lives, but at some point the saboteur may be overprotecting us from doing the things that we know would help us move closer to our goals or objectives. I hope that answers your question, but let me know if it does not.
We just got a comment that says, I think social media is perpetuating false ideals.
Well, yeah. I hear that most particularly from parents who've been trying to navigate work from home, and especially in the early stages of the pandemic, when parents had a lot more energy to dedicate to the activities they were doing at home with their children and did not anticipate, a multi-year debacle. I think that people complained so much that all these parents were online looking perfect, acting like they were perfect, showing the bread they baked and the gardens they planted, etc. And in real life, most people were treading water just to stay afloat. So again, an interesting question for you to ask yourselves about what's real for you versus what is a perception of what's going on around you.
And we're getting
I see
a lot
Mariah.
of comments.
Oh, go ahead. Please
Sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we're seeing a lot of comments saying that people, now we have language for it because we've been feeling we're putting a term to it. So now a lot of people agree with that. And I definitely agree with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that Mariah put down a comment. I feel like it's easy to forget that part of any job is learning and gaining experience. You don't need to know everything and know, how could you possibly? We talk a lot with our clients about the difference between being a subject matter expert and someone who's curious and open to learning, no matter what level you are within your organization. So that starts from the very first day you get there and goes till you possibly become the CEO of the organization. What don't I know? Who do I need to talk to confirm? How do I make sure that I'm thinking correctly and not overlooking important information that might be out there? So that's an ongoing pursuit. So just to answer Mariah's question. Since we have everybody online, and I don't know what happened to Cait, I'm sure she's having a technical difficulty, but Cait, if you can still run your slides, I can do my best to jump in and try to bring the team that's on the call through some of the content. Justice, do you know if she's able to do that?
So it looks like she is not online at the moment. I know someone in the chat earlier said that Seattle has having random snow that was not prepared for, and I believe it was a technical thing.
Okay.
Kara just wrote something in the chat. It says, I feel a personal failure if someone doesn't resonate with me or someone doesn't want to continue to see me as a patient. Is that an imposter thing, or is that more or other issues?
Can I just clarify, Kara, do you mean someone doesn't continue to see me as a patient person or a patient coworker? But yes, while you type back in that, the way I'm interpreting this question has a lot to do with the dynamics between you and someone else. You cannot manage the responses, of course, of somebody else. So the imposter syndrome is really, it's aligned with this, but I think what this is more about is deciding what you can control and deciding if you were prepared for the conversation, the presentation, whatever it may be, knowing yourself well enough to know if you stepped in prepared, open to feedback, etc. Oh, okay. So yeah, and I see I'm a nurse practitioner. So how you want a client to see you. Yeah. Sure, there's a little bit of imposter syndrome in this, but more of it's about your identity around yourself and how you are going to define your values and your objectives in doing the important work that you're doing. We've all been around people who may diss us or disqualify us or ignore us. And if we know we're kind of in our lane doing our thing, we can address that kind of negative feedback, take into account what's appropriate, and move on with our objective and vision for what makes the most sense. And I'm sorry, because I know that's it's a little particular with feedback from a patient that's different from feedback from a coworker or a manager. So, if you want to follow up with either Cait or me offline to talk about that, I'm glad to dig into the details a little bit further. Who else has an example of a situation where they really recall their imposter syndrome flaring? And what was going on when that happened? In our coaching, that's one of the ways we work with our clients, is to ask people to start to notice when they feel that imposter syndrome bubbling up. What's going on in those circumstances? Yeah.
Betsy, while we wait for those people to type that answer out, we do have a question from Jovan. Out of the 5 types of imposter syndrome that Cait presented, is there one or more that's worse than the other ones, or does it kind of depend on you and your current handling of everything?
Yeah. I don't know for sure, but the thing that the coaches and I typically encounter the most is the not good enough imposter. And I'm not looking at Cait's slide, so she may have called that something. But second guessing our work, double checking our work, delaying finishing our work for fear that it might not be good enough or might not be enough. So it's that sort of never enough, never good enough sense. And so that's the most prevalent, I believe. The thing that's worse is the thing that's worse for you as an individual. The thing that may get in the way of you deciding to move closer to your goals, to show up the way that you know you're capable and want to show up. So again, it's self-recognition of what's getting in the way for you. I see that Alicia said one of the times that you notice this is applying for jobs or trying something new. Or that Katie said that actually, or Alicia, when I was graduating college, I didn't think I deserved my degree. Oh my gosh, how many of us have done that? You hear people, even when they get their PhD, who am I to have a PhD? Who am I to have a doctor? Who am I to be a doctor? Who am I to start a company? Who are you? What if you're exactly what the world needs? And so how do you look that imposter in the face and say, thank you. Thank you for making sure that I'm prepared to become a doctor, prepared to go out into the world of work. Thank you for holding me accountable. And yes, I'm ready. So you have to take it within yourself to address this imposter. You may need facts to support it. Look at this recommendation I got from my last employer. He or she proves that I was capable for that job, that I was ready for that job. You may have to gather those facts together. There are a lot of different tricks you can apply to start practicing every day, thanking and then addressing the imposter. Heather, when I hear criticism from my manager, I tend to defend it. It depends a lot on how people deliver feedback. Oh my gosh, that's the truth. If they care enough, we can collaborate better together. So we talk a lot in our leadership coaching in particular, and with our corporate clients as well, about learning to give and receive feedback. It's the entire topic of a lot of our webinars and blogs and other available information on Amalavita, and maybe in the post email. Justice will be kind enough to provide a few of those resources to you. But for sure, giving and receiving feedback is a two-way street. You can assess whether the organization in which you're working has what we call a culture of feedback. Is it comfortable for people to provide each other with objective feedback? What is the intent behind the feedback? And how do you gauge whether people are perceiving the giving and receiving of feedback the way you anticipate that they will? A lot of that comes down to communication style. And going back to the comment from the person who is a nurse practitioner, to decide what to do with the feedback you receive. So in this day and age, we all know facts are facts, things are black and white. And then there's some fine lines on a lot of things that are opinion, discretion, or based on experience. How do you take what the facts are and then finesse them with information that you may or may not know, even if it's about your personal style? So I hope that's helpful. And Heather, I just say one thing. This is basic to a lot of coaching principles. But when you hear criticism from a manager and you know you tend to defend, what are the simple practices you can put in place, literally, to take 2 seconds, which will feel like 2 minutes, to take a deep breath, pause, and consider what's an appropriate response here? What will help me get closer to my goals with this person? What might I not understand about where he or she is coming from? So that literally 2-second pause can give you what you need to decide how to respond. Justice, do you want to keep asking stuff?
We've got 2 more comments from Lauren and Crystal, if you don't mind going with that. I don't know if we're going to be able to get Cait back on for the end of this. So if you don't mind just answering these last couple of questions.
Then you'll close it up. Okay, great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Betsy.
Great. So Lauren, I made a major career change and I felt like I had justified my skills from a whole other industry as applicable. And then I got the job and I was convinced they would figure that out and I couldn't really do the job and got let go. I'm trying to read into the middle of this, but I'm sensing what you thought was you were prepared to be trained to do a new job. And there was a missing link between what your expectations were and what the organization was able or willing to provide to you. That can certainly happen. I think that is a really interesting conversation to have with a career coach to figure out in the process of interviewing, and especially when you're deciding whether to navigate into a new role and responsibility or new a type of work. What are the kinds of questions you ask to make sure that they're willing to accept you and give you the training and feedback you're going to need to thrive? So I'm not 100% sure if that's answering your question, but I hope so.
Thank you so much, Betsy. It looks like, yes.
Okay, when did I drop? Because I just finished that whole entire presentation.
Oh my goodness.
How long was I gone?
So that looks like the last part was the reframing part from Heather.
Oh my gosh. Let's do it again. Okay. I am so sorry. A really long time. I didn't even realize, how did this happen? Okay, let's start this again. Start. Okay, I'm gonna need your help here. This is really, wow, I wonder what happened. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, this is so crazy, you guys. I did so much, a really long time. Okay, so you have to tell me what slide I was. Did we get through the 5 types of imposters?
Yes, we did.
Did we get through this?
Yes.
Did we get through the coping strategies?
No.
So we've gone through all of this slide.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. Oh my goodness. Now I'm feeling my imposter syndrome come through, and I'm going to actually work live through these coping strategies. Okay. Cancel. Okay. I am sharing. I see the little red dot at the top. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I am so sorry, everyone. Coping strategies. This is hilarious. You gotta love it. Gotta love technology. So coping strategies, it really starts with asking yourself the hard questions. What core beliefs do you have about yourself? Do I believe I'm worthy of love? Must I be perfect to seek approval of others? And you must be comfortable confronting some of these deeply ingrained beliefs you hold about yourself. And this can often be really hard because these beliefs are beneath the surface, right? And so I'm going to give you some coping techniques, but the number one thing here in befriending your inner imposter is if you're feeling like this is really taking over, I want you to ask yourself those questions, but really share your feelings, right? That's number one. Work with a coach. Oftentimes those irrational beliefs that we have are actually beneath the surface, and someone who's experienced can get to the heart of that and help you uncover them because we don't often see them. I did a webinar a few weeks ago about limiting beliefs. Check that one out. It kind of talks a little bit about that. Focusing on others. So maybe it feels counterintuitive, but paying attention to others, and I mean empathizing with others who you're witnessing having those same experiences, bring them into the group, right? Like ask them to come along. And by practicing your own skills, you build the confidence by like sharing those abilities with others, if that makes sense. Assessing your abilities. So if you have a longstanding belief about your incompetence in performance, make a realistic assessment about your abilities and write down all the things that you're good at, your strengths, your accomplishments, and use that as a motivating tool to get out of your way, right? Small steps. I see this a lot. People don't want to take any action at all because they think of everything that they need to do. So avoid focusing on doing things perfectly, but rather do things reasonably well and reward yourself for taking action along the way. The next one, question your thoughts. As you assess your abilities, take baby steps and take baby steps. Question whether your thoughts are actually rational. Does it really make sense that you're a fraud given all that you know? Avoid comparison. So every time we compare ourselves to others, we're going to find some fault with ourselves. And that just fuels imposter syndrome even more. And that feeling of not being good enough. So instead, if you're going to be working with others or looking at them, focus on listening to them and learning from them. Social media detox. So this is one that I've seen a lot of clients who've sort of told themselves that they need to do this. Look, studies show that the overuse of mindless scrolling on social media is related to feelings of inferiority. So if you are trying to portray an image that doesn't match who you are, or you're seeing these images that are false perceptions of reality, it's only going to make matters worse, and it's only going to make you feel more like a fraud. So this is something that can be a really helpful coping strategy for people. Acceptance. This means not fighting the feelings of not belonging, but actually acknowledging and accepting that you have those feelings. That is the first step of self-awareness. And that's the first step in really unraveling the beliefs that are holding you back. Look, we're all here together. We're all experiencing this. There's a reason why we're all on this call today. So I just want to point that out. Keep moving. I have that on there. You know, as coaches, and I think every coach would tell you this, our goal is to help you come to a new awareness and help you to take action. And oftentimes what I see, especially with the conversation around imposter syndrome, there can be a lot of awareness and no action. And the reality is sometimes confidence doesn't happen first and then you're able to take action, right? So actually knowing that and refusing to let it hold you back, no matter how much you feel you don't belong, don't let it stop you from pursuing your goals. Just keep going, take action, have the awareness. That's important, right? We've talked a lot about awareness today, but keep moving is critical here in terms of befriending your inner imposter to build confidence. So in closing, I just want to give you all some tools and resources that I found to be really helpful in my own coaching and for my own imposter syndrome. Dr. Ethan Kroos, he wrote a book called Chatter. I don't know if you've heard of it. He also has a podcast, fascinating psychologist. And He talks about how we all have a voice inside our head and we want the inner coach to lift us up, but more often our inner critic or inner imposter, as I'm talking about, actually sinks us. And so in his book, he explores these silent conversations, this chatter, which is just so interesting. And really, it's kind of around that fear and judgment and doubt that we have. And he explains how it shapes our lives. And what I love about the book is that not only does he explain this through his research, but he provides a number of tools that you can implement on your own, that you can leverage through relationships to others, and tools that involve your environment. And so we've talked a lot today about the tools that you can implement on your own. They're free. I always say that to clients too, right? When they're looking for a solution, a lot of this is things that you can implement on your own. So that distanced self-talk that we talked about, referring you to yourself as you, can be really empowering. And actually, it makes us less activated. I don't know if I had skipped over that part, if you got there. Imagining advising a friend was another one we talked about. What would you tell a friend in the same situation, and using that as motivation? Reframing your experience as a challenge can be a helpful tool that you can implement on your own. Another one can be, using a lucky charm as superstition, right? So if there's like a crystal or something you can hold that makes you feel confident, or you can kind of use it as an anchor, that can be helpful. Rituals can also be helpful. So, I mean, these are just a few of the things that he talks about as tools that you implement on your own. And then he talks about tools that you can implement that leverage your relationship with others. So looking at a photo of a loved one and sort of channeling them, minimizing the social media usage, which we've talked about. And then the final one, which I love, is tools that involve your environment. So creating order. It's often said that if you declutter your space, you're actually decluttering your mind, right? So he talks a lot about that as a tool that you can implement. And then increasing your exposure to green spaces. So getting outside in nature, bringing plants into your home. Lots of research around that too. So I just wanted to point that out for you. This is going to be in the summary when it comes out as another tool. I think the key here is, and every coach should tell you this, that you must figure out for yourself which combination of these practices or tools is going to work best for you. I've given you with a number of things today, probably a lot that you'll want to come back to. Some of it is not going to work for you. Some of it will, right? But it's about experimenting and figuring out what system helps you befriend your inner imposter and helps you quiet that negative self-talk. I really love this quote by Seth Godin. When faced with imposter syndrome, see it as the proof that we're innovating, leading, and creating. I see that as something that's really motivating. It certainly is something that, when fear comes in, it's kind of a proof that we care, right? When those anxiety, nerves, when that feeling of being like a fraud steps in, it can just show that we are innovating, leading, and creating. So hopefully that's motivating for you all. I'd love you to revisit your experience. What, if anything, would you do differently? And what have you learned from today? So feel free to use the chat for that. Justice, I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of explain the last few things, because I've been talking for a long time. I need a little bit of water, okay?
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much, Cait. So, if anything today resonated with you, or you want to continue to have this conversation, further, I'm going to go ahead and let me make sure. 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and drop the links again to the consults. I apologize. There you go. There you are. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the link again for the consult. And I'm also going to drop the link to our website directly, where you can read more about us as a company and some of the other coaches on our team. We do have other coaches that also do imposter syndrome, but Cait herself has a couple spots left for anybody that really resonated with this conversation and wants to keep it going. I'm also linking our YouTube channel, where you have all of our other coaches and their events as well as the Eventbrite for upcoming things of that nature. So at this point, If there are any other questions, anybody that wants to come up, you're more than welcome to come up and mute to ask those questions. If you would prefer to type them, whatever you're comfortable with.
What was
Sorry, do we have a hello?
question? How we feel different? What was the question?
I'm so sorry. No, this is the question and answer portion for you. So you go ahead and
let me ask you that again. So based on everything today, if you were to revisit that experience earlier in the session, I asked about you to bring to mind an experience where you've had imposter syndrome. Is there anything that you do differently, and what have you learned? I'll put that in the chat too.
And then I did want to say thank you again to everyone who stuck around with us and bear with us for the tech difficulties. And thank you again for Betsy for jumping in there and stepping up. We really appreciate all of you guys being here today. And we have a comment from Yolan. It says, I would utilize the imposter syndrome as a healthy balance within my mindset as something that keeps me grounded and not complacent.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that that's why I put that quote in there at the end of just like, I feel like this can be something that can also really motivate us. Like it doesn't have to be this sort of like really debilitating thing. It can be something that shows like, hey, you kind of give a little bit of a shit, you know, like sorry to drop that language, but like you care. And I really like that, Yovan.
Does anybody have any questions for Cait last night? We have a couple minutes here at the end.
Oh my gosh, Yovan, the mean girl, she unplugged the technology today. I have no idea what happened. I'm so sorry. What I can say is I'm going to offer that in the future, I'm going to bring this topic up again and we'll redo it. Thanks, Deidre. I appreciate that. That's really sweet. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Like I said, this is something that, look, everyone, however many people are on the call today, we all experience this. I certainly experience it. It came through even with the technical difficulties, okay? But we got through it, and I promise you that you can come out the other side. All of these tools are there for you. You can utilize them. They're free. And if you feel like you need that additional support and you really need to unpack and you're feeling stuck, we're here for you.
It looks like we have a question from Heather. Can you let us know more about the reframing in slide 9?
Yes. So reframing is a technique that I would say every coach that I know uses. And oftentimes what that can be like is looking at the situation and reframing it as a challenge that you can overcome. What I found through my own life experience and through just observing others through coaching is oftentimes the anxiety or the feeling that we have building up to something is far worse than actually doing the thing. When we're in it, it's typically okay. So reminding yourself, hey, I've really overcome hard things in the past before, things that are way harder than that presentation and way harder, right? Like I think that is a collective shared thing. That we've all experienced hardship. And when we can sort of look at that and say, oh, okay, yes, you have, it makes that other thing feel much less daunting. Hope that helps.
We have a question from Lori. It says, what if you have someone who is the total opposite of perfectionist, expert, super person, soloist, or natural genius, and yet they behave all superiority? They behave with superiority, excuse me.
I think I need to read that question. What if you have someone who's the total opposite of the perfectionist, so maybe Lori I would have to know, I think, more context, but maybe this person is one of the 30% who doesn't have imposter syndrome. But yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. I wouldn't, would have to know more about the context, and there would probably be relationship dynamics. This to me sounds like overly confident rather than lacking confidence, just based on what you have written there. That's my observation.
Well, all right. It looks like we have the 4 questions for today. Thank you so much for everyone for again being with us today on our Tuesday. Oh, we have one last question. Christina, can you explain further what kind of imposter syndrome show up when you were facilitating and something goes wrong?
So for me, I also just, sorry, before I answer that, Heather, I think that's such a good point. When you know more, you realize you don't know much. I think that is kind of what happens to me. The more that I research things, I can just go down a spiral of, I definitely fall into the expert, I think, just to, when you talk about when something goes wrong. So look, what the chatter that happens in my head is you all have come to this webinar to really understand how to befriend your inner imposter to build confidence. When technology fails, there's a gap. I'm not meeting your expectations. I myself look like a fraud because I'm not giving you what you expected, and you've come in looking to me as the expert on this. And so in that moment, I really felt I feel really unprofessional. That is not how I want to be perceived. I want to be perceived as an expert in my field. That's my imposter syndrome, right? And so, look, I don't know how I did it. I think there was no choice but to bounce back from that today, right? We're all human. We're all here together. I hope that it didn't ruin your experience. That is really, ultimately what it comes down to. And I hope that we can talk about this again and get a good recording of this out to you all, because this is important. This is, everyone makes mistakes, right? And everyone has these feelings of imposter syndrome. And so I will make a promise to, in the next few months, revisit this topic, and we'll do another session so you can get some clear understanding of what this all is, or email me and we can talk.
Thank you so much, everyone, again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our future events. But with that,
and thanks all the clients that I have. I've seen so many names on the call today that I know. So thank you all for joining.
We hope you have a great rest of your day, guys, and stay safe. We'll talk soon.
Bye.